Klockan är 6. Välkommen till kvällens provning. Provning 227. En extra insatsprovning som vi har gjort för att vi måste ha någonting att göra i mörkret, tycker vi. Och det har kommit med kort varsel, men vi är ett bra gäng ändå, tycker jag. Och om ni också har sett det utskicket som kommer idag, så är det en förändring i ordningen på whiskyn mot vad det står på underlägget. Har ni sett den allihopa? Man börjar med trademark som är den. Sen är det ändring då på Linkwood är glas nummer 2. Glendullan är glas nummer 3. Artrosk är ju glas nummer 4. Sen är det en ändring igen då. Glenlossie är glas nummer 5. Och Daljuan är glas nummer 6. Och Kaulila är fortfarande glas nummer 7. Och när vi röstar senare så är det det som gäller. Jag tänkte inte vara så långdragen, så I'm gonna introduce Rupert Patrick, co-founder of the company, James Eadie. And with him he has Hugh Barron, who's a sales manager for James Eadie. So over to you guys for the tasting.
Thank you very much. I'm going to assume that everybody can hear me. If you can't, just sort of wave something. But yeah, what a lovely way to kick off a Friday evening. Obviously, it's a little bit earlier here than it is with you. We're 5 o'clock, so that's always a good time to have your first whiskey on a Friday night. So thank you very much indeed, the team, Henrik and the team, and indeed our importers, Michael and Patrick, for making this happen. Great opportunity, really nice opportunity to push our message a little bit wider and deeper in Sweden, a market that I know reasonably well from my MacLeod days when I was working for Leonard Russell in the 90s and early 2000s. I had great times coming to Stockholm. So yeah, real pleasure, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I've instructed Hugh, who did wave earlier, to jump in and contribute to the evening as much as he can. He knows probably as much about whiskey as I do in his rather shorter career in Scotch whiskey, but it's yeah. So and he's always got an interesting view on our bottlings and how we do things. So he will be a great contributor. And do ask him any tricky questions. Leave the easy ones for me. So as was said, I'm very lucky that I've had the chance to revive the James Eadie whiskey business. In 2015, it sort of became more and more obvious that I had to do it. The whiskey business that my great-great-grandfather set up had died out by about 1950, when my grandfather sold the business. Bass, the big brewer, had bought the beer side of James Eadie, and within that, the whole spirit and sherry, port, and masala side was also gobbled up. So it was a dormant company. I'd never dreamt of reviving this business, but had the opportunity to do it as I set up another business, and I'm really glad that we did it, and we'll never now look back. It's just looking forward, trying to live up to the sort of ethos and the culture that James Eadie set out with as a great entrepreneur in the 19th century. Pretty much his ethos was to be incredibly diligent, very transparent, hardworking, and fair. Those were the things that people spoke about when they talked about the original James Eadie. So in everything that we do, and I hope as you begin to get to know our products, you'll see that we're very transparent. We do things, we say what we're going to do, we do it, we follow through, and we don't hide anything from our customers in terms of what we do, when we do it. And indeed, we tell you what we're going to do. We tell you about our spring and our autumn bottlings in advance. So it's been a real privilege. Let's get stuck straight into the Trademark X. As you'll see, my bottle is almost empty. It's always the emptiest one in my drinks cupboard. It's my go-to blended Scotch whiskey, and we're all incredibly proud of this blend, not only because the constituents, the ingredients are fascinating, and we use the 14 different malts and grains that were in the whiskey ledgers of my ancestor from about 1860 to 1890. We have 30 years worth of whiskey books, ledgers, accounts, everything. And that gave us the real insight into how James Eadie was putting his blend together. And we've stuck to the same 14 whiskies. In truth and in absolute transparency, there were another couple of whiskies that he used that we can't possibly use because they were distilleries that shut down around about 1900, 1910. So we weren't able to use those, but everything else is there. And that was only half of the project, though. Getting the 14 whiskies, it was all about getting a master blender to put it together in the right way. And we're very grateful to Norman Matheson, who's now in his early 70s, who's been blending since he was about, well, he tells you about 18 or 19, but truth is that he was more like 16 and 17 when he joined the whiskey business. So he's got many years of blending. So let's have a look at this, and we can talk a little bit more about how the blend was made and what Norman did. But if you, the first things you'll notice from Trademark X is a very light color. Naturally, it's unchill filtered. We bottle it at the old strength of 45.6, and we like all of our whiskies to be a very natural color. Gone are the days for me, and indeed for many of us, where you think, you know, dark whiskies are great. You know, caramel's an important thing to put into whiskies. The more you work and live and breathe in this trade, the more you want it as natural as possible. And I'm sure many of you agree with me. When you taste a whiskey that's been heavily colored, it really puts you off your stride. So a very natural color. There are whiskies in here. Obviously, the Little Mill and the Cambus are very old. They're over 20 years old, both of them. Some whiskies have been in sherry casks. The majority have been in bourbon casks, both refill and first fill. And as I said, 12 single malts and 2 grain whiskies. So the comment that we get most often with Trademark X, particularly at before COVID, when we were at trade shows and tasting events with customers, we give it to people and they just go, "Oh, this is fantastic! It's wonderful. You know, which single malt is this?" And of course, you know, it's because we're all in the world where more noise and more talking is about single malts rather than blends. Anyway, it's a very well put together blend, and we've now bottled it 3 times, and every single time we come out with a very, very similar bottling. The one I've got is actually the 3rd edition, but it will be very similar to yours if you've got the 2nd, or indeed if you've got the 1st. Hugh, which one have you got?
I've got the 3rd one here, but I have a 2nd edition somewhere, but they all taste very, very similar. I don't think I'll be able to tell the difference, to be perfectly honest. I don't think I'm an expert in that, but they all taste delicious, which is the most important thing. Yeah, and it was when I first started working here in 2018, I used to be a single malt snob. So when I had my interview with Rupert, he asked me, well, he told me to come and try the blend. And in my head, I've just left uni and I was living at home. So my parents wanted me to leave. So in my head, I was like, just say yes, it's a blend. It's nice, but you need a job. And we'll worry about selling it after I hopefully get the job. And it completely blew me away when I first tried it, because it's so layered and so distinctive in each of those layerings. I've loved peated whiskies since I've been stealing that off my dad when I was 16. So for me, I love the smoke, but it was the first whiskey I tried where there was just a bit more, the smoke wasn't always ever present. It comes very much at the end and it lingers, and it's not the overpowering flavor. So this was the blend that made me really appreciate blends and what master blenders do, such as Norman for us. So yeah, it's my everyday dram, so to speak. Not saying I drink it every day, but if I had to have one whiskey for the rest of my life, it would probably be this, because it's so well balanced and has so many wonderful layers to it. And it's got a high malt content. So Rupert's talked about our grains in there, which are Cambus and Cameron Bridge, and we have 12 malts. It's 60% grain, 40% malt. So it's a very high malt content, and you can really tell that in the blend. And I think that's just a nod to our past and to the golden age of blending, where you didn't cut it with cheap grain whiskey, which tends to happen now in the big
Yeah.
bottles. So it is, yeah, I absolutely love it. I never get bored of it. I always have it every single one of my tastings. It's just fantastic, and it's great that we've been able to revive it using the family recipe, so to speak.
I would suggest, just as you've got it in your glass, I would suggest approaching it without any water added, just as it is. It's as I say, 45.6. There's no, when you smell it, even when you taste it, there's absolutely no sort of alcohol burn, because it is very structured, very layered, and just incredibly well made. But I always say that on the nose, I pick up a whiff of peat, a tiny bit, but sometimes I don't even get that. And on the nose, I'm just getting the raisins, the slightly oily, slightly sweet, sugary icing sugar sort of nose. If I look a little bit deeper, then I begin to get the sort of, whether it's cut grass or hay, sort of dry hay. Then at the next step, a little bit of the sweetness matures into a sort of dark chocolatey sweetness. And then when you go even deeper than that, you start to, I think, feel, that sort of dark prune juice sort of flavor, scent on the nose. So there's an awful lot going on the nose, without giving you the hint of the Lagavulin, the Talisker, and the Kalila that are lurking behind all these other lovely Speyside and Highland malts. But then when you taste it, it's, you really know that you are in you're with a blend that has got a very, very significant percentage of smoky peaty whiskey. And having talked about it so much, I've got to have a dram.
Is that your first one of the day, Rupert?
That is my, oh, look, the peat just absolutely comes through so quickly. And it's the reverse on the palate. I find I get the oily, peaty, smoky, what I call kippers, sort of, the smoked mackerel and kippers. I get that straight away. But then as it flows around your mouth and it begins to show you the finish, that's when the real Speyside flavors come back. And that's what Richard Woodard said when he was one of the first people to publish his tasting notes for Trademark X on scotchwhisky.com when it was alive. And he talked about the layering and the depth of flavors and complexity, and I think he absolutely nailed it. So it just keeps surprising you, which is always a good thing. And it was particularly a good thing before Hugh joined the business, and our sales were bumping along the bottom, and I wasn't doing a very good job. I was in a store, and the manager didn't have a lot of time, but I asked him to taste it, and I got all the negative buying signals. He was in a bit of a rush. Who's James Eadie? It's a new brand. I don't like it. But anyway, he then tasted it, and I was sort of packing up my things, about to leave. And literally, I was sort of turned around. I was at the door, and he said, "Stop." He said, "Hold on." He said, I put this into my mouth about 3 or 4 minutes ago, and it's still there. And he said, it's got great length. It's got a lovely finish. And now this whiskey is really impressing me. So I went back in and we had another conversation. But it just showed that it stays with you, and it makes a lasting impression.
Yeah, for me, I got into trouble once at a festival because everyone was asking for our single malts and they weren't interested in the blend. So I was talking to this guy, and he asked for one of the single malts, and I poured the blend. And then he sipped it, and eventually we got talking, and he said, "Well, can I try your blend?" And that's when I was a bit sort of snookered, because I've already given him the blend, so I poured it again, and he wasn't too best pleased. But it just shows that if they don't really know the difference between blends and single malts, they can't really tell the difference to this wonderful whiskey. But he wasn't too happy with me. But we blend, so we changed someone's mind from single malt snob to blend, which is, I think, what we would like to achieve with the Trademark X, and as a company as a whole, we're sort of encouraging people to try whiskey, whether it's single grain or blends or young malts or sherry finished malts. Whiskey's whiskey. So if it's a good glass of whiskey, it's for everyone out there, and it doesn't really matter what label it's got on it.
Very good point. Now, two things while you were talking, Hugh, that from our first blending operation, I think in 2017.
Yeah.
So I'm up in Scotland at Glenturner, where there's a bottling plant and a blending facility, and Norman is there, obviously doing most of the job, and Leon and I are with him. And there was two things I learned from that day. Firstly, in January in Scotland, you need to have much more clothes on than you expect, because we were in the warehouse and it was blimmin' cold. But,
is that the photo of you? Sorry, Rib, is that the photo of you behind you in the warehouse?
It is, yeah, with a very, very. I didn't think you could see the picture. Anyway, but no, the point I was wanting to make was Norman was, he all the casks were laid out, all the different grains, all the different malts, and obviously the first job is to vat the grains together, vat the malts together, then you put everything together. So we were inspecting every single cask on its own, and if I'd been doing that on my own, it would have taken me probably all day. With 80 casks, it took Norman probably 45 minutes, not even that. It was really quick. There was the the warehouseman pulling out the whiskey into a small tasting glass, and for Norman it was a couple of sniffs and he moved on, because he was looking for was, is this whiskey correct? Do I then allow this to go into the blend? And we went down those casks at the speed of knots, and I couldn't keep up. I really couldn't. My nose was just, it was hopeless after about 10 casks. And we got to the end, and Norman said to me, right, Rupert, any of those casks would you reject? And I said, well, Norman, no, frankly, I couldn't. I didn't get any off notes. I didn't get any sour casks. But I'm in your hands. You're the master here. And he said, right, there was one, and it was about number 25 or so. And he took me back to it, and it was a refill grain cask, Cameron Brigg, and on sort of second, third, fourth inspection, I just begun to get a very small, slightly different note to the other casks. It just wasn't quite right, and he'd picked it up in literally 3 seconds, clocked it, and moved on. It was absolutely phenomenal. And the second thing he told me, which was really interesting, was he didn't want too many of the grain casks to be in first fill bourbon casks. Up until that point, I was always thinking a first fill cask is better than a second fill or a refill, third fill. And he said, no, when you're blending, you don't want the vanilla sweetness. You don't want all that first fill character and quality to come out in your blend, because otherwise it's going to be too overpowering. And I think his rule of thumb was at least 80% of the grain in refill bourbon casks and 20% first fill, just to add that little extra bit of vanilla and maturity. But it was a real lesson. So we no longer turn our back on good quality refill casks, as indeed you'll see when we come on to some of the small batches. That was a real lesson.
I think the third lesson Norman taught us as well, and I think you were saying, because you've worked with teachers and all that, and Johnny Walker and all that, Norman sort of told you to marry it in casks after, which is something that you sort of thought it was marketing jargon sort of thing. But actually the difference between the unmarried trademark X and the married trademark X is absolutely phenomenal, isn't it? The 6 months.
Yeah, very, very good point. It is easy to think, especially if you're in a big whiskey company, to marry with trademark X, that first bottling was married for just over 3 months. So effectively, we've blended it. We've blended the malts and the grains. We put it back into the vat, and then we put it back into the same casks. So it's going back into the 80 casks that you've used for another 3 months. And because Norman was adamant that we should do this, we said yes. But we did take a sample, obviously, before and after marrying, and it was phenomenal. It was a really big difference. So of course, we were a bit of a doubting Thomas, but now we're firmly convinced that that's the right thing to do. So we continue to do it. And indeed, the second trademark X bottling and the third one have been married for longer. They've been more like 6 months in the cask. So yeah,
that's only because I haven't sold the first one quick enough. But I think the lesson, and definitely what Norman has taught us and what we take into our single malts, and hopefully you'll see it throughout the 6 single malts that we're trying today. Norman, with the marrying of the cask, he says you can't rush whiskey. Whiskey takes 3 years and 1 day to make. That doesn't mean it's ready. So you've just got to look out. If you look after your whiskey, then the rest of the business will look after itself. So That's one thing that he made us truly appreciate, was sort of look after your stock. I know that sounds quite sensible, but, you know, marrying cask, and even with the cask finishing, we have to choose our wood properly and then choose the right sort of cask to go with the small batch and the cask finishing. So that's Norman's philosophy, that sort of that we hold ourselves to as well. Like, you can't rush whiskey, and when it's ready, it's ready. You can't force it to be ready before it's not. And that's exactly where we get our trademark X from, and that's what follows through with the rest of our single malts that we'll try shortly. But for me personally, I'm very attached to trademark X, because when I first started working here in 2018, we didn't do single malts into the wider market. We were exclusive with Royal Mile. So I was only responsible for the trademark X, and trying to sell a blend in London as your first job is quite tough. So walking around with trademark X in my bag, I've been rejected a lot, but we stuck at it together. So for me, it's personally a whiskey that I cherish, and I think it's a fantastic example and a great entry point into the James Eadie brand is through this trademark X.
Good, thank you, Hugh. Well, I mean, I'm going to leave a little bit in my glass so we can come back to it, because it's really nice once you've gone through some single malts to keep coming back to the blend. But let's move on to the second one, the Linkwood small batch. So I think you in the introduction, the order was slightly rearranged from your tasting, Matt. So we're going to do Linkwood and the Glendullan, both small batches, which I'll explain in a minute. Then the Thrust, Glenlossie, Dalyuen, and the Kalila Paolo Cortado at the end. So just by way of very quick intro to the three ranges we do, other than the trademark X, the James Eadie business is derived of a small batch where we get 2 or 3 casks and we put them together, obviously all single malts and single casks, but we put those together to create a run of about 1,000 to 1,100 bottles. And normally it's a mixture of first fill and refill casks, depending, unless it's the Kalila, in which case I use only refill casks because I want as much distillery character as possible. After the small batch, we go to single casks, so much more sort of standard obvious, just 1 cask at a time. We don't give it a second maturation in any other type of wood. It's literally a cask that we've bought younger, we've matured it, and then we've bottled it at cask strength. And then our third category is the James Eadie cask finish range, which we started approximately 3 years ago. These are whiskies that we have recast. We've over the last 3 or 4 years, we've begun to work out which whiskies we think work best in which cask finishes. We're still learning, but what we've done has become very popular. We've had some great fun with some very dark sherries. We finish in Marsala, in Madeira, and obviously in the different sherries from Paolo Cortado, Amontillado, Oloroso, and Pedro Jimenez. Now, these are all casks. I haven't just dreamt them up and decided what would be nice. You might think I would do tequila next, but these are all casks that James Eadie used himself. They're all in his whiskey ledgers in the 19th century. He was importing whiskies from lots of places, and it's lovely to have this sort of link back to what he was doing. So you won't find any very unusual ones for our cask finishes. They're all pretty standard Scotch whiskey, tried and tested casks. So I know we've got a couple of cask finishes later on, in fact 3, I think. So starting with the small batch, don't we all just love distillery character coming through? Not complicated, really good Scotch whiskey character, wonderful traditional, particularly in these ones, Speyside flavors, where the whiskey does the talking. The cask is there, but it's not the dominant feature. And both Linkwood and Glendullan are really good examples of wonderful Speyside whiskies, underrated generally because they are typically used as blending malts. I mean, Linkwood, obviously you can get both of them from some of the distillery bottlings, but mostly through independent bottlers. I've always been a fan of Linkwood going back to the early 90s. And this one, I think, is just a really great example of why we will continue to do small batch bottlings. The other key thing here is price. And it's a great sort of real driving force for us, for me at James Eadie and now Hugh and Leon. Putting single malts out there at affordable prices, sensible prices, not being short term, not sort of thinking, well, how much can we sell this for, but really just being, you know, fair and reasonable. So, you know, I hope that in each market that we sell, obviously your taxes are high in Sweden compared to other markets, but I hope that relatively our small batches come onto the market at competitive prices. So that said, let's have a little look at the Linkwood small batch. You'll notice straight away that the strength that we bottle these at is 46%. So once again, like the Trademark X, you can drink them absolutely at the bottling strength of 46. But I don't, I wouldn't judge anybody at any time if they added water to this or the Trademark X or any of our cask strength whiskies. I'm probably, relative to Hugh and Leon, I add more water to my whiskies than they do. They probably think I'm a bit of a Philistine. But I'm learning, well, with the small batches, I tend not to now. However, I might add a lump of ice every now and then, particularly in the summer. So the Trademark X, I think, sorry, not Trademark, the Linkwood was definitely 3 casks. It was, I think, 2 refill.
It was 3 recharred hogsheads.
It was 3 recharred hogsheads. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, that does change the picture quite a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that yours or Leon's pick?
Well, of this, I think it was Leon's pick, but we've done a recharred Linkwood before. We did a 10-year-old, exactly the same idea, so 3 recharred hogsheads. And what we've learned pretty quickly with when you're dealing with casks, none of them behave in the way you think they will. So this is a bottle that you guys are trying now. It's got a lovely peacock on it because that is one of the pubs that James Eadie used to own. But here you'll see that it is very light in colour. So 3 recharred hogsheads. The one that we did last year, so exactly the same casks, came out at this colour here, if you can see it. So those are those side by side. So the idea after releasing this one, we always thought recharred hogsheads would come out of that colour. It didn't. So that's just an example of how different the casks are alongside. But the result is exactly the same. You get a classic Linkwood character there of that sort of fruity and floral space on. And I think, again, going through this tasting list, it's very important to remember that single malt distilleries are actually ingredients to blends. So Linkwood is in that style because blenders want it to be in that style. So it's just fantastic because it is a big blending malt, so to speak. It's great that we're able to put this in the bottle and in our small batch as well. So people who haven't tried Linkwood before get a true example of that distillery character. But this came out in October, and Rupert could tell you a bit more about the labels because a very good artist painted them. He might be.
Well, she might be downstairs cooking supper for 10 people fairly soon. We've got a very nice dinner party. No, so Belle is she's a better artist than she is a cook. But as you said, the images that we're using on our small batch right now are there to bring back to mind the pubs that my ancestor owned in the 19th century. At one time, at the peak, he had just under 300 different pubs through which he would sell his beer, whiskey, sherries, ports, and everything else. And we've got records, we've got all lovely, actually, I think it is here. I've got a wonderful old document here, which is from 1896. This was sent to me by somebody online who just worked out we'd revived the business. And this is basically, it's a financial document that they were raising money, maybe to buy some more pubs. And in this, they list every single pub that James Eadie owned, showing the date that they bought it and the details behind it all. So with this wonderful document, we just thought, right, let's make more noise about it. And as I said, Belle, my wife, is a wildlife artist. And when you look at the pub names, there was an awful lot of animals. So it made sense to ask her if she'd like to do some sketches for the labels. And the result is, we've done 8 so far, haven't we?
Yeah. We've done 8. And
I think the Glendullan's the Black Swan.
Yep.
We've done things like the Blue Boar and the Red Lion, etc. So
Black Lion behind me.
Black Lion. So it's a nice little extra sort of twist on the James Eadie story. but it's not more important than the actual quality of the whiskey. And just as you were talking, Hugh, that wonderful Speyside, you know, I just get all that orange lemon peel, sort of icing sugar, little bit, tiny bit sort of spicy, and green apples coming through both on the nose and on the palate. And then the sort of finish is, for me, a sort of long-lasting pear drop finish. Absolutely lovely. And you can see why that's such a great constituent of a blend as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been around since 1826, the distillery. So it's obviously done something right to be around for almost 200 years. But just touching on the recharred hogsheads again, as Rupert mentioned, we tend to use refill and first fill bourbon casks to bring out that distillery character. But sometimes we use a recharred hogshead. And basically what that means is after a cask has been used for so long, it might become a bit stale or a bit of a dud. So what Coopers do, they basically put a flamethrower through it to rejuvenate the cask whilst shaving it as well. And that's just to bring the cask back to life. And that's what we mean when we talk about recharred hogsheads. And by rejuvenating that cask, you tend to get those sweeter notes coming out again. But here it's just quite a light recharred, and it's delicious. I think it's just a prime example of a 10-year-old linkwood, which you don't really see other than from independent bottlers and Flora and Fauna. So as I said before, it's great to sort of show you a component of the blend, which tends to go into Johnny Walker. I think it's the main one that it's used for, because it does produce about 2.5 million litres a year. So just showing that it produces a lot of whiskey, and you don't see a lot of it in single malt form. It's,
in a way, it's not quite as layered and complex as the Trademark X, but there's an awful lot going on in there, isn't there? I know right now I'm getting that sort of butterscotch sweetness. It's sort of developing. I suppose the other thing that we've all learned, and I'm sure many of us would agree, you know, like a good wine that needs to breathe in the glass. You know, when you first pour these whiskies out, they need a bit of warming up and a little bit of time just for them to release their flavors. Which is why at tastings very often you pour the whiskies quite early. You know, back in the day at McLeod's, we always had those little tops to the whiskey glasses, and you left the tops on just so that it could come to room temperature. And nearer the time we were tasting, we'd take the tops off, and everything would then start coming to life. They're very nice. You don't see.
We don't have that luxury here at James Eadie, though.
No, you can't afford the tops.
Yeah, just pour it in. But no, Linkwood. I think Linkwood is a distillery that we've been quite well known for now. I think our Linkwoods and Coalilas tend to catch the attention of a lot of people. So I'd say it's a distillery quite close to our hearts in that sense. We love working with it, and we've done a few cask finishes as well, and single cask. But Linkwood is a classic Speyside that we really enjoy working with, and hopefully we can keep on producing a Linkwood a year, which would be good. Would be great.
Yeah, excellent. And yeah, so that really is it. It's in line with our majority of our small batches. You know, great distillery character. Obviously, you know, the color is light, but we like that. Interesting when you showed the other one. Was that what was the makeup of that other?
That was so it's exactly the same. Exactly the same constituents. So that is 3 recharred hogsheads, as I mentioned before. So it just shows that we don't really know what the wood's going to do. So it's sort of hiss and hope, because as I said before, the premise was, because this was so popular and absolutely delicious, we thought, oh, we'll just do another one and it'll look exactly the same. But when you're only working with 3 casks, each cask is very, very unique. And I don't think it's till you hit about 20 casks of the same distillery where you get that general distillery character. So because we're working with 2 to 3 casks, each release is very unique, even though we're sort of adding 3 casks together. So it just, as I said, it just shows the complete difference in those casks and not behaving the way we wanted to. Equally as good though, I'd say. But this was a superb bottle. I think Ralphie reviewed it and he was a big fan of it.
Oh yeah, he was, wasn't he? Wasn't that? Did that get the 90 points?
I got the 90 points. Yeah.
Yeah.
This would get 95, obviously, because it's latest.
Oh yeah, I'm a fan of that. All right, well, so that's it's gonna be interesting when we come back at the end to the scoring of the three top 3 whiskies. It can be very difficult to leave something out. Shall we move on?
Go to
Yeah,
the Glendullan.
yeah, let's go to the Glendullan.
Yeah, this one's 2 refill and first fill bourbon cask.
Okay. And Glendullan, if I remember right, it's just north of Dufftown, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, or Duffton, as the locals call it.
Duffton, yes, not Dufftown. Yeah, I beg your pardon, Duffton.
Yeah, and
probably even less well known than Linkwood, Glendullan.
yeah, I mean, it's a singleton release for North America, so it's only really sold in North America. So again, the great thing about being an independent bottler is that we're able to sort of show you guys these distilleries that people might not have heard of before or even tried. And so Glendullan is very much landing this in that category.
But it's only been a singleton for, I'm going to guess, 4 or 5 years. The singleton was always used to be, going back in the day, all Thrusk.
Yeah, and then they moved all Thrusk to the Flora and Fauna, didn't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is our next whiskey. So we better not talk too much about all Thrusk. Yeah.
No, we'll stick with the Black Swan.
Yeah. So if anyone hasn't seen the label, here's the Black Swan, which was bought by James Eadie in 1869. So if you pick up one of our small batch bottles, all the detail is in the back. So there's a tiny bit of writing here. Oh, there it is. We'll tell you which pub it's dedicated to as well. But this is the Black Swan. And this came out in March this year. So this came out in our spring release.
Yeah, as you see behind you, Hugh, well, you can't see the camera, but you've got, we've got all 8 different original drawings. There's the Black Swan, well done.
Yeah, there it is, just on the top there.
So it was our label designer, designer who said, right, the Black Swan looks lovely, but let's put it on both sides of the label. And that was a genius moment. We hadn't thought about that until he came up with the idea.
You've got the peacock above your desk with the old boot. So
yes, the old boot. No funny jokes on that one, thank you.
No.
So the Glendullan, in terms of tasting notes and tasting sort of observations, there's definitely more of a, well, I get a slightly more dark burnt sugar nose to it. It's sort of slightly richer and deeper for me than the Linkwood. And it's that sort of, it's your toast in the morning, or a sort of like a French brioche. There's that sort of baked dough, like you walked into a bakery with a sort of apple flavor behind it.
Yeah, it's grassy and slightly oily, I would say, than the Linkwood. But I think this is a good time to sort of talk about the sort of method to our madness when it comes to small batch and how we go about selecting casks for the bottling. So this one is made out of 2 refill and first fill bourbon casks. And so Norman, who does a blend, doesn't sort of blend our small batch. That is done by Rupert, Leon and I. And it's usually hotly debated. But generally we check our casks every 3 months just to make sure that nothing's going wrong. And that's mainly to do with the cask finishing, because they can accelerate quite quickly and be ruined. So when it comes to selecting the small batch, the 3 of us sit around, and there's no sort of magic way of doing it. We literally have 3 to 6 cask samples of the one distillery that we want to use. And we pour them into our Glencans, and we sort of smell them, taste them, and then chuck them into one, and then try it again and go, oh, that's actually really nice. And it isn't until all 3 of us agree, which could be hours, until we put it into the bottle, or that makes up the component. So the more whiskey we get, the more we have to try. And I'm not saying I'm complaining about my job, but if you've got to play football on a Tuesday and you've got 20 cask samples, it does make football too fun, but it's a great part of the job. But that's the idea. And what we're trying to do, because each cask is so unique, although there is the undertones from that distillery, when we're just trying to sort of put it all together. So it's not to say that the small batch is sort of a mixture of like the misfit casks. It's noticing that one has a very sweet flavor, and it'll balance very well with a refill that has more of a grassy note in the Glendullan case, or one has more of that cereally note. So it's trying to pair those 3 together to bring out the distillery character. We're not trying to put just 3 of the same all into one bottle. So it's sort of putting a whiskey jigsaw together, a whiskey puzzle together, and it's not until we all agree.
Yeah, no, during lockdown, it was very difficult for us to do this because we couldn't get together, the three of us. There's probably 60 or 70 miles between Leon, Hugh, and myself. We weren't allowed to use the office. And
Leon can't drive.
Leon doesn't drive. So it was really difficult. So what we ended up doing, this is being recorded, but Hugh and I managed somewhere to get together, and we had two days of sampling casks, and then we sort of gave it our thoughts and then sent the whole batch to Leon to do on his own. So we stuck to the same process, but it just wasn't all together.
I wouldn't be worried about this being recorded, Rupert, because it is on our Instagram.
Oh, is it? Okay, fair enough.
To catch us, yeah. So if you go on our Instagram page, you'll see us talk about the small batches and our cast finishes, and you also see it was most of the samples on the table. So you'll see there's quite a few samples that we've got to go through. But yeah, for me, it's the most enjoyable part. It's the most nerve-wracking part, because after we've decided what goes into bottle and it gets bottled, then we've got to wait to see if you guys like it. And so every release, there's a bit of euphoria over what we've selected. And then when it gets released, there's a bit of 2 weeks of sort of nervous excitement until we start doing tastings like this and get your feedback, whether our palates have actually hit the spot. But yeah, I'd say the vatting of those casks is the most enjoyable. I was staying at my girlfriend's house, and her mum walked into where I was working, and I had about 20 cask samples. And she said to me when she saw it walked in, she's like, "God, no wonder you don't get anything done during the day."
Yeah, well,
but it is part of the job. Occupational hazard, I think is what we call it.
Yeah. So I wonder, has anybody got any comments about the nose or the flavour of this whiskey compared to the Linkwood? If anybody has to either say it or put it up on the chat, I'll be really interested in how you compare these two and what impressions are. I do find them very different. I get a slight, sort of slight pineapple nose coming through on that towards the end, with a little bit of pepper and spiciness.
I find Glendullan is sort of very sort of grassy and oily. I really enjoy it. And it was actually built. It was built in 1897 by an Aberdeen blender. So again, they built this distillery for that flavour. And do you know the guy's name? It's quite a funny name. So the blender was called William Williams.
Oh yeah, was it William Williamson? I can't remember.
Yeah, no, I think it was William Williams. So again, being a blender in Aberdeen, he obviously needed this character, and so he built the distillery just north of Dufton. So again, showing its quality, it's lasted over 120 years now, and it's a brilliant distillery. It's just such a shame that you don't really get it in single malt price. So I hope if you haven't tried it before, I hope you like it, and if not, then you don't see much of it. So there's nothing to worry about. We'll move on to the next release.
That's really surprised me this evening. That one, it's better than I thought it was. Okay, so shall we keep moving? Anybody? Unless somebody shouts, we'll keep moving. Yeah. We can always come back.
Yeah, we can ramble on.
Yeah. So now we're going to Orthrusk.
Yeah. This is a cracker.
It's not very fair, is it? You've got the whole bottle and you've given me these little samples.
Well, maybe if you're in the office.
It's the wrong way around.
Oh, but yeah.
Well, that's good.
I think the first thing, talking about single cask, is this is where we move to our sort of black label. And basically our black label, if you see anything with a black label with James Eadie on it, it means it's cask strength. So it comes with a warning. Our cask finish will have a twinge of colour at the bottom, but here with this Orthrusk, because it's just a single cask, it's just a pure black label. And here, this Orthrusk is 12 years old, and it's spent its entirety in a first fill bourbon cask. And I'm very jealous that it's not in the UK, because it's an export exclusive, so you can only buy it in our export countries, and you can't.
Oh well, that's a bit of colour that's quite important to this conversation, because it's, overall. When we started out with the James Eadie business, I thought we would be selling about 80% overseas in the export markets, predominantly in Europe, and about 20% in the UK, in England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. And I mean, that would be a fair, a very fair percentage. But as it's turned out, we were surprised at how well our whiskies went down, particularly in the first year with Royal Mile exclusively, and then after that more widely. And the demand increased dramatically. So, and we've only got a certain amount of stock. We don't have endless supplies. We're building and we're growing, but we couldn't suddenly muscle up more stock. So that sort of balance has now moved to more like nearly 50-50. Even last year was probably 35-65, but it's amazing how strong the demand has been from the sort of the real rock steady, solid UK customers like Royal Mile Whiskies, Luvians, all Hugh's customers. Basically, he's opened up a huge amount of them. But the point here is that when we taste a really wonderful cask, and if it's only one cask, it's like, well, do we sell this in the UK, or do we actually say this is an exclusive for a export customer, or just a general export cask where we'll split it between 7 or 8 customers? And it's a very difficult one because Hugh's got his own interest. Well, he did until about a year ago, 18 months, when I said, well, I want to introduce you to a couple of export markets, Sweden, Canada. And so now you're sort of torn between, where do I keep my loyalties?
Yeah, so before, so Leon, who's our director of operations, has all these wonderful spreadsheets about what he thinks is ready, and he gives it to Rupert and I. So about twice a year, Rupert and I have heated debates over what should go to the UK and the export. And basically, the rule of thumb is I can argue as much as I want until Rupert says he's the boss, and it goes where he wants it. So we do fight over some bottles, but for this, I was very, very jealous that you guys got this one, because this is, All Thrusk is one of my favourite distilleries. But again, that is a very good part of the job, is sort of debating with Rupert. But now he has given me the Sweden market, so I work very closely with Selected Malts. I think we started working with them back in June. So I now look after Sweden. So hopefully I'll come out to a festival soon when we're allowed, and hopefully meet you all in person. And he's also given me Canada as well, which makes me realise he's given me the coldest countries that we support to. So he obviously wants me to go out there and after Italy and all those countries. But so hopefully I'll see everyone in person sooner rather than later as well, because I'm very excited about looking after Sweden.
Excellent. Oh, now
we'll talk about the whiskey, shall we?
Yeah. Now I have added a tiny bit of water to this. I've just opened it up.
Yeah, very, very wise. It is 55.8% ABV. I just need to get a glass of water.
So it's I sum this sort of whiskey up as a lovely summer single malt whiskey, because it's just got all that, there's connotations of honey bees and the vanilla sweetness, green apples, and that's on the nose. And then when you come to drinking it, I find it's a wonderful sort of shortbread undertone here, with a little bit of ginger coming through, and back with some sort of prunes and plums. So it's definitely a Speyside single malt, and it's I think we've done quite a few All Thrusks between 10 and 12 years old.
Yeah, it's one of our favourite distilleries that we work with, that supply to us. I find it really nutty. That's the way I sort of describe All Thrusk. And it's got quite a heavy character. So when it comes to cask finishing, we've done a few cask finishes in All Thrusk because we believe it can stand up to the stronger cask finishes. But it's great to do a single cask.
It's got what Norman calls that slightly meaty sort of background flavour to it.
Yeah.
Very, very different to the Glendullan and the Linkwood before.
Again, I mean, they're all three from Speyside. And how all three are very different. And again, linking back to single malts are ingredients for blends. I mean, for this All Thrust, it's quite a modern distillery as well. So I think this is built in around about 1972. So very, very modern. And it was made for J&B, basically, which your father used to sell.
Yeah, my father was responsible for some of the whiskies for J&B.
Yeah, so this was one of them that was basically, again, purposely built alongside Strathmore and Glen Spey, and I think Knockdhu was the other one that all go into J&B. So purposely built for this nutty, heavy, meaty character to go into the J&B. And now owned by Diageo, obviously, as well.
I know, well, that obviously in the end of 98, 99, when IDV and UDV merged, it was an extraordinary time because these two very big whiskey companies were coming together, and the Monopolies and Mergers Commission was very interested in how they were going to, not have a dominant sort of influence on the Scotch whiskey trade. I think a few brands obviously had to be sold. Bacardi obviously picked up a few. And then they had to decide whether they were going to really push Johnny Walker or J&B, because both of them at the time, if you can believe it, they were both selling around 5 million cases each. So there was no obvious brand, to push, but they had to make a decision, because obviously there's only so much whiskey stocks, and as the new company named Diageo, they had to pick the brand they were going to put most effort behind. And I thought it was actually rather sad that Johnny Walker sort of came out on top over J&B. I guess it was because Johnny Walker was much more widely distributed and spread. It was in more markets, particularly in Asia, than J&B. J&B was very much a Southern European brand. It was Spain and Portugal and Greece, and it was it wasn't a sort of nightclub nighttime drink, but it had 2 or 3 very, very powerful markets, and it had less of a footprint and less of a track record in Asia, which probably Diageo thought was going to be, the real growth engine room of the business. So I've grilled Mike Kidd, who's the sort of stock controller of Diageo, many times about, how that decision was made and who actually made it, and what the other reasons were. And he won't be drawn on it at any time. But all he says is decisions, had to be made, priorities had to be chosen. But they're still very, J&B is still a fantastic blend. I find it very, very difficult to get my father to drink anything other than J&B. Call him old-fashioned, and I think he's allowed to be that at 93 years old.
Well, that was the same with my grandfather. My grandfather was a grouse man through and through. So much so that when he was a Scot, he was from Aberdeen. So much so when I started working for James Eadie, I was over the moon that I could give him a whiskey. So I gave him the trademark X. And I remember he took a sip and he was like, "Can I have my grouse back now?" That's how much he loved grouse. But again, back in the day when J&B, well, the heights were in the 60s, 70s, and grouse, they had unbelievable single malts in there. I mean, grouse would have been made up of Macallan, Glenrothes, and Highland Park.
Yeah.
And it's obviously not made up of those whiskies anymore. So for your father and my grandfather, that's what they got weaned on, and they just stuck with their brand, loyal to their brand.
Yeah, there is absolutely no question that those blends in the 80s and 90s were significantly better. It seems like a terrible thing to say, but they were much better than they are today.
Other than trademark X, of course.
Yeah, trademark X. Well, it wasn't there in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah,
it was sleeping.
Yeah,
it was completely dormant.
Just having a nap.
Oh, it's fascinating, isn't it? Going on from the Linkwood to the Glendullan and then to this Orthrusk. Definitely the right order to have them in, because there is a sort of a scale of, I suppose, earthiness, meatiness, and strength of flavour. I get that slightly sort of beeswax, sort of almost sort of furniture polish.
Yes, as soon as I added water, beeswax is definitely the one.
Yeah.
For me there as well.
Oh, real honey on that nose there. Just lovely honey coming up the top. That's fantastic. I shouldn't say that. It's our whiskey.
No, they're all good.
So time-wise, we're just under an hour in, and we've got 3 more whiskies. So we're doing okay. I hope.
Is everyone comfortable? No one's bored?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Thumbs up.
Enjoying themselves.
Good stuff. Well, let's move on to the Glenlossie. Got to find another glass.
Glen, yeah. Again, another export exclusive as well. So again, buy this here in the UK. Has everyone finished your thrust? We'll be rushing them. I think everyone's probably got 7 glasses as well, so I've just been
having a little bit of a water break. Just
yeah. I'm going to get those glasses as well.
So the Glenlossie, it's an Amontillado cast finish, and it's 14 years old. Distillery just south of Elgin. I haven't been to Glenlossie. Have you been there too?
No, I haven't, but I know it shares a site with Mannockmore, so they share a courtyard with Mannockmore. So Glenlossie is quite an old distillery, and then whoever Diageo were before, who owned it, decided to build Mannockmore next door to it. So Mannockmore is a very different distillery character to it. So Glenlossie, I would say, is grassy and oily, whilst Mannockmore is more meaty and nutty. But then again, 2 distilleries right next door to each other. Yeah, there's Mannockmore. Yeah,
there's a Mannockmore that we did. That was an exclusive bottling for the Netherlands, and that's also that's an Oloroso finish as well. Yeah. Beautiful colour. 12 years old.
Yeah, so Mannockmore and Glenlossie, and sort of rumour has it that 1 year the workforce will work in Glenlossie and then they'll turn off the stills and then walk across and work in Mannockmore for the next year. Again, because they both needed those 2 different styles to go into their blends and for production. But no, I haven't been to Glenlossie. I don't think it's one of those pretty distilleries. I think it's very much a factory that you might not go and see or won't be allowed to see because it's just churning out a lot of whiskey at the time.
Yeah, that's what we forget. Many of them are pretty ugly places.
Yeah, they are factories.
When we, I was up in Speyside with Leon, right at the early days of our business, and he was particularly keen to get a little look at Inchgower. And Inchgower is not open to the public. You can't visit it. It's right up on the coast, and the gates right up by the road were closed. I mean, you really couldn't get anyone near. But Leon had his camera with him. He was determined to go and get a picture quite as close up as he could. So we parked on the side of the road and he walked across a couple of fields, one of them with quite a few Highland cows in it. And I thought he was rather brave. And he went and he spent about an hour trying to get a good picture of Inchgower, came back and said, no, there is not a good angle for this distillery. And,
you can't flatter it.
No, it wasn't very funny. Whereas we definitely like the whiskey.
Yeah, fantastic whiskey.
But no, so this is our first, first this evening of the cast finishes. And I think you hinted at it earlier, but the real skill with these cast finishes is not just picking the right cask for the right whiskey. There is an awful lot in that. It's also then working out how long that finish needs to be. Because we've had quite a few examples where within 3 to 4 months, it's done. You know, the cask has had its impact. It's changed the whiskey quite a lot. The colours obviously darkened. And any further, if you left it for another 3, 4, 5 months, you'd go over the top. So as a matter of course, what we do when we re-rack the casks, we then take samples. What we ask the warehouse to send us samples every 3 months. Now that's it's obviously time consuming, it's expensive, but it has to be done because no point in having a wonderful Oloroso or PX cask or Amontillado in this case, and ruining it with a maturation way beyond what the whiskey can take. So yeah, it was very, very surprising to us how quickly, if you get good casks and if you spend the money to get good sherry casks, how amazing that finish can be in a relatively short time. Probably worth saying that we get most of our casks through Speyside Cooperage. We know them well; they know us. They're learning about our business, and they've proved very, very reliable. We do pay up. I mean, everybody knows that sherry casks are not cheap, but it definitely enhances some of these whiskies, and it enables us to do some fantastic things on our single malts.
Yeah.
What I suppose the most dramatic one was some of those well, some of the PX casks, but also the quarter casks that we use. They were good.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that we don't look to release dark whiskies. That's very much a surprise when we get these re-racks or these casks. So we don't say, oh, we really need to get a whiskey that's black. It's very much a byproduct of just how the cask works, and that's why we have to keep the honour. I mean, I think about a year and a half ago, we got some samples, and we were generally concerned that we would have to sell it back to the bodega because it just was pitch black after about 5 months finishing. So the key to cask finishing is getting the perfect balance between the distillery character and the wood. So we are not looking to mask any of the distillery character. We don't want it to sort of just taste of sherry. And we've experimented with quarter casks. Quarter casks, we'd probably do 3 or 4 months before it would probably go overpowered, but we don't have a set time. We're not saying, okay, if it's first fill hogshead of Oloroso PX, Amontillado in this case, we're not saying 6 months. A rule of thumb, we'll say, oh, it should be ready around about 6 to 8 months. But here, in this one, this has taken 13 months of finishing. And our Dao Yun that we're going to try next has taken 31 months, but that's been in the sherry butt. So the more we do this, the more we sort of understand what's going on with the cask finishing, but there is no exact science to it. So as Rupert said, it is very much worth spending the money to check on your whiskies. But because there's definitely times, Rupert, when we've got the samples and we've gone, oh no,
yeah, that's
absolutely pitch black. So it's not something that we aim to do. And there's some criticism in cask finishing. A lot of people, well, not a lot of people, some people say that you only cask finish to sort of mask the whiskey before it. And hopefully as you're trying this, that's very much not what we're trying to do. And it's about pairing those distilleries. So with Glenlossie, we wouldn't put it in a PX necessarily because it's this grassy distillery. We want to pair it with Amontillado because Amontillado is in between a Fino and Oloroso. So on the sherry scale, you have a Fino, which is the driest, and you've got PX, which is the sweetest, and then you've got nutty Oloroso. And Amontillado is basically on its way from being, when it first starts, it's supposed to be sort of Oloroso, but it gets fortified at a certain point, and the floor breaks down and turns it nutty. So it's quite dry and quite nutty. So you're not getting those sweet notes that you tend to think of when you talk about PX. And so that's why we paired it with Glenlossie. So it's getting that balance right. And that is one thing that we look for. We don't want it to taste like PX because otherwise it's not whiskey. So it's getting it right in the middle of it. And there's been times when we've looked at some whiskies and they haven't been quite right. And we get a bit impatient. I mean, one of the originals that we laid down was an all Thrask in first of all, Oloroso Hogshead, which roughly would take, as I said, about 6 to 8 months. And it took about 28 months for it to be ready. So we kept on trying it, and there was just a missing part. It was just a bit too rough. It wasn't quite ready. And eventually when we tried it after about 26 months, it just hit the spot. So it's being patient and make sure you don't overkill it as well. But again, wood just behaves in its own way, which we found out the hard way. But we haven't had any duds. We haven't said we can't drink that. So at the moment, we've been quite lucky. But for this, Rupert decided to take it to the European market. So as I said before, you can't get this in the UK, and I'm very jealous because I think this is a very decent match. The grassy and nutty with slight sweetness.
Yeah, it's what I think is really, really nice. This reminds me of one of the best points in the day. If you got a hard day's work and you stop for a cup of coffee and some sort of Danish pastry or Swedish pastry, whatever that might be. Just that lovely sort of slightly waffle flavor to me coming through on it, over the top of well, I get a sort of nectarine. It's not the apples and pears. This is more nectarine. I think in our tasting notes somebody said a sort of white wine type flavor. But yeah, it's that mid morning time when you shouldn't be drinking whiskey, but reminded of that lovely baking smell and flavor. And I think that's a really good example of how the finish isn't that strong. It's there, but it's not overpowering the whiskey.
It's definitely balancing. And what I love about this, so if you go back through the All For Us, the Glendullan and the Linkwoods, which tends to be sort of being in bourbon casks, here with that finish, you get this lovely dry finish to it, which I love, and it really lingers, and it's just really well balanced, I'll say, with the Glenmorangie, and that's what I love about it. I mean, I've still got that sort of flavour, whilst with the Glendullan and the small batch, it's a very urbany freshness to it, whilst this has just got a lovely dryness to Amontillado. And it's something that we are looking to do more of. Obviously, PX and Oloroso are the main sherries that people use, but we are finishing a lot more in Palo Cortado, which we've got one at the end. So but Amontillado and Palo Cortado are very quickly becoming our favourite sherry to finish in, because they are so different and very unique and very drying.
Yeah, well, when we come on to this, when we come on to the last one, the Kalila Palo Cortado, I'll have my rant at that point.
you can have your rant, but then I think the result will prove.
Yeah, I know. Fair enough.
Yeah, we could talk about that actually. Yeah. But what do you guys think of the cast finish? Sort of it very different. So what we're trying to do with each range is sort of give you a sort of insights into different sort of ways you can use whiskey and how versatile whiskey is when it comes to sort of cast finishing and vatting in the small batch. Yeah, this is something that we're becoming known for after this is our third year of doing it. So we're learning, but it's definitely the most enjoyable part of the job is pairing distilleries with the cast finish that we're going to do. And once you hit a jackpot, we're trying to repeat them. So we've got the Kalila and Palo Cortado, Linkwood and Amontillado work very well together. And with those meteor distilleries, Marsala and Madeira. So we're going to bring out some more and more interesting finishes, which James Eadie only used. So it's very important to reiterate that we only use wood that James Eadie used to use. I love port finishing. I love port casks, but Leon is very gleeful because he doesn't like it. And he says, well, they're not in the ledgers, we can't bottle it. So again, just going back to our ledgers, isn't it? So it's just staying true to what James Eadie did. We sort of joke, the three of us, that we haven't sort of created the company, we're just copying what he did because he did it so well. So it's very easy that he's left us this sort of paper trail of his success, and we're just going along and doing what he used to do.
Well, yeah, that's not a bad thing to do.
It's fantastic.
There's a very good restaurant on a street near you, and it's always full. Open another one next door to it.
Yeah,
just do the same thing. Okay. I mean, shall we move on to the Dalio and Oloroso?
Yeah, well, if everyone's got a glass again, it'd be good to compare and contrast these two, because Oloroso, although a sherry, is slightly different to Amontillado, and Dalio is obviously very different to Glenmorangie. So just showing the different sort of matchups make completely different whiskies. All my friends who don't like whiskey says whiskey all tastes the same. I think this is a prime example that they certainly don't.
No, I mean,
sorry, joke there. It was finished for 13 months in first fill Amontillado hogshead, and I believe it was European oak as well. So if you ever buy a bottle, all the information is on our label there. So we tell you what we finished in, what would be finished in, what bottle number it is, if it's a cask finish or a single cask, and the date it was distilled as well. So there we are. And the reason for that is because Leon, thank God Leon pays a lot of attention to detail, because I'm sure Rupert and I would be in trouble if it wasn't for Leon. So much so that he's got the nickname Red Tape in the office, because he makes sure everything is all good before it goes into bottle. But yeah. Again, all our transparency as well. We want to be transparent. Has everyone poured out the Oloroso, the Dalio and Oloroso? Do you have this, Rupert?
I don't have that exact one here. No, you failed to send me that sample.
Oh, well, because this is our last bottle.
That's the last one we've got.
That's the last one we've got in the office.
Okay, well, I do remember tasting it. So what I've
Yeah.
done, I've given myself the Managmore Oloroso just so I can be in the game here. But
Yeah, just so you know,
I will
very different whiskies.
Yeah, no, I'll let you do the sort of comment on the flavour. But this was a refill Oloroso, wasn't it?
Yeah, refill Oloroso, but so this Daoyun spent 31 months in an Oloroso butt, and definitely refill. So we've done a finish in the butt before. So refill naturally would take longer because there will be less flavors in the cask, and obviously being a butt, which is about 500 liters compared to a hogshead, which was the Glenlossie, is about 250 liters. And I got a D at chemistry at GCSE, so I'm not very good at all that sort of stuff. But
yeah, you'll have to translate that into Swedish. Well, a D.
I failed chemistry at school, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
It didn't count towards my end of the year.
Failed at school.
Economics. That's why I'm not an accountant, probably.
Yeah, maths probably.
No, it was good at maths. Got an A at maths. That's all right.
Okay.
So, but anyway, so this has spent 31 months because a butt is obviously bigger, 500 liters. So there's less sort of contact in there. So that is why it's taken so long. And here again, it's not pitch black at all. It's this lovely color, sort of lovely amber color. And Daoyuan is one of our favorite distilleries. Again, I know I've said that about the Linkwood and Kolila, but Daoyuan is a lovely meaty distillate, I would say. So we can trust it in sort of stronger casks or being matured for long enough. And so the rule of thumb we have here is Benrinnes, Blair Athol are the first two. So if we're ever going to try new wood, we'll put it into Blair Athol or Benrinnes, or we'll put Benrinnes and Blair Athol in there, because if they can't handle it, then nothing else will, because they're very meaty and sort of very robust. And Daoyuan comes into that category as well. So
worth pointing out that Daoyuan is in Trademark X.
Daoyuan is in Trademark X, yeah. Again, I think it was bought by the Mackenzie Group. It was made by the Mackenzie Group. So Daoyuan is in the Trademark X, and Mackenzie, the person who built it, was obviously quite good mates with your ancestor, Rupert, because we bought quite a lot of Daoyuan. So again, in our ledgers, James used to mature his Daoyuan on Orso, so we thought we'll do that as well.
No, also there's a nice connection there, because Daoyuan is in the vicinity of one year Benrinnes, which the better known distillery there is Glenfarclas, just on the other side of Benrinnes Hill.
Yeah.
And that was where James Eadie, that my great-great-grandfather, retired when he'd, I think he was probably in his mid-60s. He bought an estate up near Benrinnes called Glenrinnes. So he's bought an estate and he's retired very near to Daoyuan and Benrinnes, you know, which were two of his favorite whiskies. So he was probably, you know, he probably wasn't drinking any single malts back in those days, though. It was all blend.
Do you think that's why he moved up there, because he had his two favorites?
Well, it's quite. I mean, it's part of history that I'd love to know more about. You know, so there he was in Burton-on-Trent, you know, since the age of 14, and then he retires and then goes back up to Scotland for probably only 10 years. I think he died when he was 73 or 74. So it wasn't a long time, but he was quite involved with the, you know, back in Scotland. He was a Justice of the Peace and Deputy Lord Lieutenant. But then he wasn't buried there. You know, although he was back in Scotland, his homeland, where, you know, he was born and raised, he then wanted to be buried back in Burton-on-Trent. So you could argue, where was his heart? Was it in Scotland or in Burton?
Well, I think it was in Burton, because he was like the Roman Abramovich of his day. He used to own Burton Football Club.
That's true. He did, yeah.
He owned Burton Football Club, so he was a football club owner, and he also built a lot of buildings in Burton.
Yeah,
his name's there, and he also built libraries and sort of baths for people to clean in. So I think he was obviously a very generous man. So I think Burton is where
he really felt at home.
But I think Glenrinnes is where his hat was.
Yeah, yeah. No, so it was a very interesting.
Yeah, have we touched on why Trademark X is called Trademark X? I don't think we've told them the story.
No, I'm sure some people know it. Yes, the X, the trademark on the bottle.
That's an old bottle. Yeah.
Front and center. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, that is simply it was 1877, which was 2 years after the UK Trademark Act was enacted. The first ever trademark was 1876. So James Eadie, 1 year after the first ever trademark, decides that he wants a trademark for his business. And I'd just love to be there when they're racking their brains and going, well, what are we going to use? You know, and somebody obviously said, well, we're on Cross Street. The James Eadie Brewery's address is Cross Street. Let's have a cross. So the X really represents a cross to signify where their location was. And nowadays, if you try to trademark the X, you would fail. It's very difficult to get that registered as a letter of the alphabet. We were very lucky in that the trademark lasted an awfully long time. Then it lapsed for about 10 years. So when I revived the business in I think I registered the company and the trademark in 2020, well, the company in 2015 and the trademark in 2017. We got it through and we were allowed to do it because we had a lot of history. So yeah, it's lovely to have the X as a specific trademark. We have it registered in whiskey. I don't have it in wine or anything else. But it's thanks to the great sort of foresight of a man who was an absolutely brilliant entrepreneur, but who looked ahead down the line and thought, well, if I grow my business, I want something that people will know it by. So we were very lucky.
And we use that X on our single malts as well. So if you buy out a cask finish, you'll see some barley stalks in the shape of an X as well. So it's something that we always use. So we are very lucky, even though Glenmorangie tried to take it off us, but we're all right.
That might need a little bit of explaining.
Yeah. I'm sure people have realised that Glenmorangie have released a whiskey for bartenders called X by Glenmorangie.
Yeah.
It's an enjoyable experience for you, really.
I pushed it very hard, but they did. There's X by Glenmorangie, and it's all about made for mixing. It was Glenmorangie wanting to sort of, I think, broaden their appeal in a younger generation. So we saw this about a year ago, and I wasn't very happy because they really did infringe the trademark that we have registered in Class 33. So I spoke to a lawyer, and they said, yeah, that's a very clear infringement of your trademark. You know, what are you going to do? And I said, well, Glenmorangie is owned by LVMH. LVMH is a rather large global business, and their resources are going to be significantly bigger than ours if this ends up in a legal fight. Anyway, the long and the short of it was, we wrote to them to say, you know, you're infringing our trademark, please cease and desist and stop doing that. And expecting them to either go, oh, well, you're too small and we don't really care, or can we come to some arrangement? They didn't. They came back to us with what we call here in the UK with 2 barrels, like a 2-barrel shotgun. They came back very aggressive, much more aggressive than I could have imagined, basically saying, James Eadie, if you think you can get us to stop, then we will actually go to the courts to try and overturn your trademark, because today you shouldn't be able to have a trademark of a letter of the alphabet. We disregard your history. The brand had lapsed, and you know, you're nobody. And if you make a fuss, we'll really come at you heavily. And so that was a very nasty reply. But actually, as our lawyer told us, it said, well, at least you've now got their attention, and they definitely do know, you know, who you are and what your history is. And I think we can find a deal. So what actually happened in the end was I said to our lawyer, well, look, I've got about 50p to spend on this. Now I want to buy whiskey. I want to buy casks. I don't want to be spending thousands of pounds with lawyers.
I was reading up on my laws to see if I could go to court against LVMH.
But anyway, so we very, very satisfactorily got a coexistence agreement with them. We wrapped them up into a small area and said, okay, you can only use it for that product. It's got to say mixing. It's got to say X by Glenmorangie. It's got to be only single malt in that existing getup, and you cannot, in other words, use it more widely. And they so we did a proposal to them. We couldn't get them to recall the product from the market and change it, but they have honoured the fact that we have the trademark and they are permitted to use it in its current format, but nothing else. So it was a sort of victory.
Yeah.
And it did mean that I could buy more whiskey and not spend legal fees with the lawyers.
Which is great.
Right, that's a long-winded explanation, but
Trademark X, but there's the history. But yeah, anyway, back to Dalian. Sorry, going back to Dalian, which is in obviously the Trademark X, is how we led there. So with this one, what we really enjoyed about it, and this is because it's sherry, but it's also across UK and export markets, so it's available everywhere. And there's 595 bottles of this because it's a sherry bun. But what we really enjoyed about this is it's not a sweet Oloroso finish, I would say. It's got this lovely drying, slightly tannic element to it, which matches up very well with the meaty Dalian. And it is still a lovely sherry cask whiskey without it being one very dominant sherry. So again, that balance, finding that middle, we always sort of say with our cask finishes, you've got a sort of a pendulum here, and you've got your distillery character here and your wood here. And, you know, if it's young, then it's too much distillery character and it burns. And if it's too old, it's over here and there's too much wood and it's going to be very oaky. So we're just trying to get it right in that middle spot. And I think this is a prime example of a 31-month finish that hits that spot. You've got a lovely, nutty, dry Oloroso sort of finish, quite savoury sherry cask, which some people I haven't really tried before. And again, it's one of those pairings that work very, very well together. Bottle at 56%, but I think you could just drink it neat. Rupert's a bit horrified when we do try the whiskies. I don't really put much water in it. And by the end, to be honest, after 3 whiskies, I can't taste anything else. It's sort of all gone. But this one is absolutely delicious. And
too strong for me at that sort of. I mean, yeah, unless you just take a tiny, tiny bit onto the palate. Worth saying, Norman Matheson, our wonderful master blender, all of his nosing, it's mainly done on the nose, as everybody knows, but when he does taste, it's always done at around about 25 to 30% alcohol. He'll reduce everything down to that sort of level. That's pretty, I've seen that across the industry with the master blenders. I mean, obviously, when they're doing 40, 50, 60 casks at a time, if you're doing them at cask strength, you've got no chance.
Yeah.
So yeah, blenders tend to do it at 25 to 30%.
If anyone has put water in it, has it opened up nicely? What I find, you get more of that sherry note once you put water in it. It sort of frees up the tannins. But yeah, I would say it's quite a tannic flavour, quite dry, lovely, good sherry bomb, I would say, without being overly sherried. Nice balance. And you tell the difference between an Amontillado finish and now an Oloroso finish. You can see how that Amontillado is slightly drier and fruitier than the sort of dark raisin nutty Oloroso.
I'm looking at the tasting notes that together the 3 of us wrote. And actually, it's, maybe with the tasting notes, it's important to say that we only do the tasting notes once the bottling has been done. We don't do it off the cask samples. We wait till the bottles have been sent to our office, and then we do the tasting note, because otherwise you're not comparing like with like. And the 3 of us, if we're all in the office together, the 3 of us will do the tasting notes. So it's a sort of assimilation of all 3 people. But this one, I'm just looking at sort of toffee and banana and dark chocolate, walnut, and then this sort of creamy custard sort of sweetness comes through, and possibly a little bit of that sort of coffee note behind it.
Coffee note, yeah, I would say definitely coffee. But compare against the Amontillado, which is peach, and
yeah, very, very different.
Very, very different.
Well, it's 6:24, 7:24 there. Let's go to the Kalila.
Final one.
The Kalila, nobody needs to look at any tasting notes. You don't need to be analytical about it. This one is absolutely as you get it. What's in front of you doesn't need much prompting.
No.
Well, I've got to empty a glass. I've run out of glasses now, so I'm going to have to use that.
So whilst you're emptying your glass, before we talk about the whiskey, basically being an independent bottler, it's fantastic because we do limited releases and we can't recreate the bottles that we've done, bar the Trademark X. So what we're doing now is we're trying to find sort of the perfect matches. And I mentioned it before. And this Colina in Palo Cortado is just a match made in heaven. It's the royal wedding of maturation, I would say. So it took a while to get Rupert to get on board, which I'm sure he'll explain his logic there, and I'll explain the argument put against it. But we release a Palo Cortado co-leader once a year, and we're going to keep on looking to do that. We've tried it in Amontillado, which is very good in Amontillado as well. But just to add a bit of consistency to an inconsistent range, we're looking to do certain distilleries and certain releases once a year, so you guys can keep on trying it and see how they compare. So we've done a co-leader 13-year-old here in the UK, finished in Palo Cortado, and this one again is a export exclusive. But we just absolutely love it. So we lay down co-leader and Palo Cortado quite a lot. So here in the UK, we've done 9 to 11-year-olds and now 13. So hopefully we'll be bringing more of you, more co-leader to you. But what was your dislike towards finishing any Islay whiskey, Rupert?
Well,
and have you been proven wrong?
I have been proved wrong. I'm a big fan of Islay whiskey, as you know. Just for everybody's sake, I worked for Beam for 7 years, and I was very, very passionate about Lefroy, and still am. I think it's a brilliant whiskey. I've probably been to Islay 15, 20 times, and Kalila is after Lefroy probably. It was my favorite whiskey. Now it is my favorite whiskey because I think it's so versatile. But yeah, no, when you and Leon said, "Oh look, let's do a cast finish of an Islay," I sort of said, "What's the point? You know, it's so good already. Pick the right cast, whether it's a refill first of all, whatever, and then it is what it is. It speaks for itself." But you agreed that a PX or a Oloroso wouldn't work, but you both insisted that we should try a Palo Cortado finish, and it was sort of me saying, "Well, it'll never work." You know.
Yeah, try one. You were like, "Try one. Put it in one cast. That's all I'll give you." Yeah,
go and do it. It won't work. And I didn't say I'd eat my hat, but I was extremely impressed with the result. And there we go. I mean, but it's still, I mean, you're talking about your pendulum swinging between distillery character and wood. This is still very much, I mean, it's still, I think, more towards distillery character than it is even to the middle.
Yeah, no, and I think that's what you can do.
You know it's Kalila, but it's not Kalila as you know it. I don't think anybody had done a Palo Cortado Kalila finish before we.
No, well, the story with that is, so this was about 4 years ago. We were at the Whiskey Fringe in Edinburgh, that Royal Mile hold, and Leon and I were very excited because our halftime orange is basically something quite special, and our halftime orange was this Kalila Palo Cortado, and Leon was like, being the head of research operations, I don't think anyone's really, matured an Islay in a Palo Cortado. And this was 4 years ago. So we're like, oh yeah, this is a good way to introduce it to people. Anyways, we get to the Whiskey Fringe, and the table next to us were Distilled. And Distilled have now been doing quite a lot of Palo Cortado finishes with Bunnahabhain, Deanston and Legic, I think they've done. And they came over, being with that, they were releasing their main release of Deanston Palo Cortado and Bunnahabhain Palo Cortado. And they said, oh, you've done Palo Cortado as well. And we wanted to say that we were the first to do it, but no one's going to believe us because we're so small. But that's the story. So we started about 4 years ago. And I think you touched on it there, Rupert, that we didn't want to put it in PX or Oloroso.
No.
We don't want to, as I said, if we put a Colila in PX and it was pitch black, it would sell out immediately. It would sell out before it really hit the shelves because everyone wants dark whiskey without smoking. But again, the pairing of Palo Cortado, which is similar to Amontillado, it's probably, I would say, slightly nuttier and maybe a hint sweeter and saltier. I would say saltier than Amontillado. It's just an absolute perfect match. So we were even surprised when we sort of bossed it, and we were very delighted that you enjoyed it and agreed to finish it in. But that is the key thing. We're not looking to overpower that Colila smell. It's going back to that pendulum. We don't actually finish it for that long in Palo Cortado. So this one's been quite a long finish. It's been 13 months again. The one here in the UK has only been 5 months. So you don't need to finish it in particularly long, because you want to keep that lovely Coalila character. I mean, I haven't even brought the whiskey to my nose and it's in my glass and I can just smell smoky bacon from here. It's absolutely delicious. So hopefully, if you guys are Isla fans, you really enjoy it. But for me, I think Coalila, if we could own one distillery, it would be Coalila.
Yeah, well, that's
well, we'll control Johnny Walker as well by that point. But but what I love about Coalila, a lot of sort of whiskey people say, "Oh, big distilleries. No, you need a small distillery. You need to look after your stock." Coalila blows that out of the water. I think it produces about 4.5 million litres.
6 million.
6 million now. So it produces 6 million a year. And obviously Port Ellen, which is on Isla, is now opening up, which everyone's getting very excited about. But the reason why Port Ellen shut down in the first place is because Coalila was better than Port Ellen. So it just shows you that Coalila is the sort of the backbone of Diageo. And what I really, really enjoy about it, as I said, I used to steal my dad's Lagavulin. So on the southeast coast of Isla, you've got Lagavulin, Lefroy and Ardbeg, which has more of that TCP medicinal smoke. With Coalila, I would describe it as like bonfire smoke. And it's just, with this pairing with Palo Casado, I think it just works really, really well. Bottled at 56%, but again, it doesn't really need much water to it.
May I ask you? I find it very yes.
How are you, my old friend? Are you well?
Yes. I must ask you about the Coalila Palo Cortado. While most sherry casks that are used, they are produced for whiskey, but I have difficult to believe that you should produce a Palo Cortado cask for whiskey, while the sherry in itself is a mistake.
Yes. I think historically, Bernd, it's a very good question. So I didn't describe what Palo Cortado is. So historically, Palo Cortado is made by accident. So when you first make sherry, you either fortify it like PX by adding alcohol, and then you leave it to oxidize, and that's how Oloroso is made. Or you put a layer of floor, which is basically yeast, on the top, and the reactions occur there, and then you add alcohol a bit later for it to turn into Fino. With Amontillado, they fortify it at a certain point for it to turn into Amontillado. With Palo Cortado, the floor on the top breaks down by accident. And that means it oxidizes at a certain point. So you can't call it Oloroso because it's oxidizing too early and it hasn't been fortified. Now, historically, as I said, that is by accident. But because of the popularity of Palo Cortado, I could just imagine someone in the bodega now with a stick, just sort of poking holes in the floor to make sure it breaks down at a certain point. So historically, it is made by accident, but I think you can now sort of manufacture it. But if you ever see a bottle of just sherry Palo Cortado, I highly advise you to buy it because it's this lovely, dry, nutty, with a slight sort of caramel flavour. But you're right, Bernd, there's not too many Palo Cortado casks out there because it has to be done in a certain accidental way, rather than manufacturing PX, so to speak. So in the industry, people paint their casks now, which basically means they send their casks to bodegas and just be like, can you just chuck some makeshift PX in there? And then just send it back to us, so it doesn't get drunk. Well, so I imagine the Palo Cortado gets bottled, and then the cask comes over to Scotland for it to go into whiskey.
Very good explanation, I have to say.
Good. It's all lies. I mean, I completely made that up on the spot. No, but that's how Palo Cortado sort of works.
Very good. Have you been to Jerez? Have you seen?
No, I haven't. Should we do a company trip there?
I think we should. Maybe we'll do a joint one with a Swedish contingent.
Yeah, with the whiskey club.
We'd run a competition.
Do a competition.
Mm.
Get a few of them to our new office, which I could do an office tour.
No, it is. Yeah, that's great. God, and how different. I mean, if you look back now, if you comparing this or the Dalyuen to the Linkwood and the Glendallen, and then Smith Trademark X, we've been on a real journey of whiskey sort of variety. But you know, that journey was the same as they were doing in 1860 and 1870. You know, it's the same diversity and the same amazing scale of flavors that was there 150 years ago. Just probably harder to do it back then because the the reliability of the casks and the quality of the distillation was much more variable. So it is easier for us to do it.
And I think definitely, you know, being the sales manager and going around and doing tastings, what I love about doing the tastings, we're not just talking about one distillery character. We're not talking about, if we're Kilhoma, we're talking about being a farm distillery, or if we're Glenfarclas, we're talking about our sherry casks. We're just talking about whiskey in general, and we're tasting different distilleries throughout the evening, and you can see the variety in Scotch. And for me, that's what I enjoy the most. So as you say, it's been a journey from a lovely floral liquid, if you could think that far back after all our rambling, if you've woken up from your sleep, to finishing with a lovely sort of sweet Coalilo that's been finished in a Palo Cortado. It's what I really enjoy about working for James Eadie, and so we promoting whiskey in itself, not just a distillery, and showing people the varieties that you can do with different distilleries, different casks. And we've also done a Dalyun 10-year-old small batch, which I think is in Sweden as well, but we're not tasting it tonight. So if you do get a bottle of that, so you've got a 10-year-old Dalyun and a 13-year-old Dalyun, and then you can compare the difference in that as well. But there's so much variety in the industry, and that's why, you know, blends and single malts are so fantastic to keep trying. Don't be worried about the label it says or the age. Just try every whiskey you can get your hands on. Responsibly, of course, because we are
definitely responsibly. Probably, maybe before we turn it back to Henrik and see if there's any other questions. I was up in Scotland last week. I live in Oxfordshire now. I lived in Edinburgh for many years, but I was back in Edinburgh, and lots of different meetings with whiskey trade, particularly on the buying side. I had my other hat on, which is the Whiskey Invest Direct business, and I was doing my new filling purchases for next year, where we're buying sort of 50 to 100,000 litres at a time. And the industry is incredibly tight right now. I mean, you know that from seeing what's available on the market. You've looked at prices, but the words unprecedented were used by two people in terms of the outlook for the next 5 years for Scotch whisky. And that's not just, you know, single malts, but it's the blended whisky market, and the premium blended whisky market is looking pretty strong. So coming out of COVID, where some distilleries were shut down for a month or two, others for longer, and the unexpected continuation of consumption during COVID, indeed increase in some places, and now the sort of feeling in some of the emerging markets that whiskey is on the up again, and in some of the more mature markets where it's coming back, there's this outlook for the next 5 years that Scotch is actually in fantastic shape. And forecasts are being redone, and a lot of the distillers are looking around going, we haven't got enough stock. You know, we were fairly tight for the last few years, but now the outlook's even better. We're beginning to struggle a bit. So throw into that mix the fact that energy prices around the world are incredibly high, and of course energy is a major constituent of the cost of production of Scotch whisky. Add the further ingredient of the cereal prices this year, which are very high. Wheat, grain, barley, they're all much higher than they've been for many years. And you've got a perfect storm that is then exacerbated by the supply chain issues that all the Scotch whisky distillers are undergoing. So it's a really difficult time for the industry, because exciting as it is to have this great demand and this great forecast, that some people are saying 5-6% growth for the combined annual growth rate for the next 5 years, but then they got to look back at current stocks, current bottlings, current supply chains, and it's really sort of scratch your head, how do we get through this? So it's exciting from one point of view, but it's actually quite tricky from another. So for me, it sort of comes back to what do we do at James Eadie? How what risks have we got? How can we keep doing what we're doing? We're very lucky in that partly we're so small. Where if I keep buying from the places I'm very lucky enough to buy, we will be okay, and I know I can do that for the moment. Then it's about just consistency, continuity, and staying true to the message, which is keeping trademark X and the quality going, and then continuing to do the small batches, the cask finishes, and the single casks. You know, and not being greedy on prices, not being sort of, you know, short term, and building this business for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So that's my sort of undertaking to both Hugh and Leon and to our customers, that, you know, we've restarted. The whiskey market is going to be incredibly attractive for the next 5 to 10 years anyway, but we will be part of it, and we will be very loyal and very true to our customers, both in the UK and the exports, to continue what we're doing in the way that we've set out to do. So in a way, we all need to watch this space to see how other distillers and brand owners operate, and just to see how they react to the current situation, which is pretty tricky.
I think that actually goes full circle in what you're saying, what we are facing. But going back to what Norman told us, is like, look after your whiskey and everything else will look after itself. I think that's exactly his guidance to us, and that's what we are hopefully going to, well, we definitely keep on doing.
So what you say, Rupert, is that the Scotch whisky industry has not been hurted in any way by the Brexit. They are, as it has been no Brexit, they are growing. Yeah,
it's really surprising. I mean, there were, you know, if we go back, there were some issues. There were definitely, for 3 months or so, it was a bit tricky. I mean, we couldn't get stuff out of the UK and into France, for example. It was really hard, and the costs of moving some stuff were exorbitantly high. That alleviated quite quickly. But you know, I was always a believer that, you know, consumption is consumption, and the market will sort itself out, and people will get what they want, whether it's wine or beer or whiskies. You know, a market will override the sort of political side, and I'm glad it did. But no, this outlook is, I mean, if we think that, going back to, you know, when I've got records for, going back to sort of 1970s, Scotch whisky has been growing in volume terms by about 1 to 2%, 1.5% a year on average. We're looking now at more like, you know, 4 or 5% for the next 5 years. That's phenomenal. That is a major change for the particularly the blenders to deal with. So yeah, they've got some thinking to do.
So is that 5% a year, Rupert, you're saying?
Yeah. So that, you know, it's not doubling and trebling, but that's you know, when you're sitting there managing 15 years worth of whiskey supply in Diageo or Pernod Ricard or William Grant's or Edrington, you know, a 1% shift in long-term forecasts means that everything gets out of kilter very quickly, and they have to try and react to that. So as I say, I'm just really hopeful that, you know, we as an industry continue to, you know, keep the qualities high, not be short term, you know, almost in a way, not do what the industry did 10 years ago when all the age statements came off, everything was no age. You know, there was definitely a reduction in quality in a lot of products. Blends definitely suffered, and I just hope we don't go back to that sort of time, and that we would maintain a level head. And all this is caged in the picture where, you know, we're all talking about India's future as a massive consumer of Scotch. It's already a big consumer at just over 1.5 million cases. But if that Indian tax rate, which is today 150%, if that comes down to 100, which I believe it will, then again, a massive demand for Scotch whisky, which will change the game again. So yeah, I'm not sure the industry could really cope with an big Indian tax deduction right now. It would be pretty difficult.
But as we know, it takes 3 years for whiskey to become whiskey. So would you say a big part of the industry is slightly predicting the future? In that sense, because you've got to, because they don't. So when a cold wind blows and whiskey no longer is being drunk, they just turn off the taps.
Yeah.
They don't keep on producing.
No, exactly. You can ride it out, and there will always be a whiskey cycle. You know, this 5%, people might get a little bit overexcited and distill too much for a few years, but then that'll be that will be taken care of 5, 6, 7 years down the line. Yeah, the industry can be regulated because principally there are 2 very large companies who between them have over 60% of Scotch whisky production, and they're run by very, very, good accountants who don't like to waste money. So yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer that we're in great shape and we're in good shape, but the pressures that are being felt right now are starting to come through, and it's going to be a very interesting time.
So just keep drinking scotch, basically, and
Wow.
just enjoy it. But no, that's.
Well, let's Henrik. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah.
I think we've probably run our course. If there's any questions, we're delighted to hear them. But more than that, if people want to get in touch with Hugh or me after this, next week or whenever, please do. We're very, very open. We love hearing straight from our customers, and the more interaction we can have, the better, because we learn that way, and we hopefully can keep responding and adapting as we need to.
And another thing is, if you didn't like this release, we've got a new release in March. So hopefully you come back and try that. But thank you very much for your patience, and I hope you enjoyed your evening. But thank you.
May I ask one question before you leave? You will release a single cask for Sweden here within a few days, or is that?
Ben, I forgot you're on my last tasting, so you know all about that. Yes, there was supposed to be an exclusive cask arriving in Sweden. Patrick's not here to explain it, but because of the sister lager.
I am here.
Patrick is here. Okay. Well, Patrick, I will let you explain, because I don't want to give too much away.
I've been here for some time, and
Okay.
Sorry for not being there.
I got your email that you had to look after your kids.
No, they are at the TV at the moment, so it's quite calm.
Did you give them a whiskey to go to bed?
No, they got some popcorns, and I tried to, when I filled the glass with the Kalila, I only felt popcorn. So sorry for that. Regarding the single cast, the Glen Ord single cast that we have planned for, it's been bottled and it's ready, but we had some problems with transports, and the thing is that we are entering the high season, the really high season. We had one in this summer that really sort of made a huge crash in the industry when it comes to transports for the Systembolaget, and we are looking for another one during this December, coming up to Christmas. And we talked about it, me and Michael, and we thought that it's not really wise to release something in the middle of December because of all the Christmas buying and stuff. So we thought that we just move it till after the New Year's. So it will be released with the Linköping Whiskey Fair.
Here, Patrick, if you want me to show everyone.
Yeah, you please show it, because I saw the picture. It was crazy, and everybody can see.
Get closer to the camera, Hugh.
There we are. So this is a Glen Ord 13-year-old finished in first fill Oloroso.
Did you say first fill?
First fill Oloroso for 6 months. Now, going back to we don't design to make dark whiskies, but this one is very dark.
Yeah, it's dark.
It is very balanced as well, as Patrick's already tried. But we are delighted. As I said, we started working with Select Malts probably back in June. So we are absolutely delighted to do a Swedish exclusive. So you can only buy this in Sweden. And there is Select Malts on the back label as well. But that will be in your markets in 2022, which is great. As long as I don't get my hands on it first and drinkable, because it's absolutely great.
It is a similar whiskey to that was included in the 2 tastings that you had done online for Sweden earlier this year. That type of black, dark one.
Yes, again, as I said, that is by accent, not by design. So when we do come across one, because Patrick did say, if you have any dark whiskies, black whiskies, they will sell very well in Sweden. So when we looked at our casks, I think it was the first sample was after 3 months, we could tell that it was going to be dark, but we didn't think it'd be that dark, to be honest. And it wasn't until it got bottled that we saw the true colour. But yes, I would say in terms of flavour profile, I'll say it's up there with the Strathmill burnt, which we've tried twice. It's that good.
Definitely. It's with all those, Bernd, you were there when we had this Magnus Fagerström tasting, and I'm thinking of, this is only 6 months for finishing, and it's a lot of color, but it's not that super deep cherry flavor. It's more of a balanced, some more of a, the perfect mix between the time, the maturation before, and the finishing. It's kind of
exactly. I mean, as we mentioned throughout the tasting, we wouldn't bottle something that we don't like, and what we look for in our cask finishing is balance, and we wouldn't go and sell something we didn't like to the Swedish market just to get rid of it. So it still has those characteristics of our cask finish of balanced with a bit of cask, but in this case it's just quite dark in color after 6 months. But we couldn't leave it in there for any longer.
No.
Left it in for 4 months longer, then it would have been ruined. So it's come out at the perfect time.
How many bottles is it, Hugh? Just look at the label.
There is 249. I think we have 6 of them, so 243.
Okay.
Told you I've got an A in maths. But yeah, so that is 2022, coming to Sweden in 2022.
Very good.
Yeah, maybe I should just jump in, saying huge thanks to you guys, to Rupert and to Hugh, and thanks for having me. Even I only been here for some time. I haven't been with you from the beginning, but I have some information about what we are at the moment regarding stock situation and stuff.
Would you like to speak in Swedish, Patrick? Would that be easy?
I could do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think
I'm fluent, so I'll pick up on a few words.
No, okay. I'll take it in Swedish. Hej allihopa. Vi har ju en del flaskor kvar. Ni har ju provat i stort sett allt det som vi släppte här i en bit in i november. Och det finns faktiskt flaskor kvar från de flesta. Även om det är ganska få på några av dem. Jag vet att jag skickade lite siffror till Henrik tidigare, men jag kan ta dem för jag har dem nästan i huvudet. När det gäller de här small batches, Glendallen och Linkwood, så är det inte så många Glendallen kvar. Jag tror det är 10-12 stycken. Men däremot finns det mer på Linkwood. Där har vi ett 50-tal flaskor i nuläget. Sen är det värre, för att när vi kom in på Athrusk och även på Dahlewin så är det inte mer än ett 10-tal flaskor kvar där. Och Mikael, min kollega, han står just nu uppe i Örebro och jobbar för glatta livet där i den här mässan som pågår där. Där vi har med alla de här varianterna som ni har provat idag. Så det ska bli spännande att se hur den mässan utvecklar sig, framförallt att se hur alla besökarna tar emot det här med mässor, för det är ju lite grann först ut sen vi stängde ner. Men glädjande nog, om ni gillade den här Kaolailan så finns det faktiskt senast jag tittade på lagret så var det drygt 25 flaskor, så att där finns, om ni är sugna på den. Sen är det också då Glenlossie, där jag också nere på en knappa 15 flaskor. Men det är just så det ser ut just nu. Och sen som sagt kommer vi att plocka in den här Glenord i början på nästa år, för att då komma ut i samband med Linköpingsmässan, där vi kommer att vara, och den får sin premiär i samband med det. Så det är ju det som vi har liggande just nu. Och som Hugh också sa här innan, så kommer det en ny batch i mars. Där vi ska försöka ta in så mycket vi kan. Vi är ju fortfarande i en uppstart med James Eadie, men det känns som vi har fått en väldigt bra start, och det är otroligt kul. Det kommer många frågor om provningar, varav denna ikväll är ju en av dem. Och jätteroligt också att vi fick både Hugh och Rupert att hänga på här, för det är två riktigt duktiga herrar. Så jag hoppas att ni har haft en superkväll. Vad säger ni? Har det varit gott?
Det har varit... Hej, Patrik. Anders.
Hej.
Det har varit jättegott. Jag tänkte att om vi ska ta lite frågor till, så ska vi ta och rösta på kvällens bästa whisky. Och sen efter det så ska vi också berätta priserna på whiskyn, vad den kostar.
Ja, jättebra.
Jag vet inte, is there someone who has more questions to Rupert than you? Eller Patrik?
All so quiet.
I think everyone's ready for their Friday night. They're all gearing up for a night out and they want to go.
Yeah. Then we will do the poll, the voting for the best whiskey of tonight.
Kai Larson's got a question on the chat.
Okay.
Pop up. I don't know.
Are the whiskey good whiskey is the number for the Systembolaget, eller otherwise I order a bottle? Patrik, är det artikelnummer, va?
Ja, jag kan vänta lite grann.
Vi kan ta dem efter omröstningen.
Ja, det kan vi göra.
Vi kan till och med skicka ut dem efter provningen istället.
Ja, det kan vi också göra.
Kan jag fixa.
Ja, det kan vi fixa.
Ja, bra.
Om det är enklare.
Ja.
Annars kan man ju bara gå in och leta på, antar jag, respektive sort. Så hittar man den här.
Kan man också
Men
göra.
inte nu då, inte innan vi röstar va?
Nej.
Nej, men så bråttom är det väl inte.
Nej. Vi kör röstningen. Så ni röstar då på en röst på kvällens bästa whisky, en på den näst bästa, en på tredje bästa. Och sitter ni flera stycken på samma inloggning så kör ni i chatten, röstar ni, så räknar vi ihop dem också. Så vi kör röstningen nu.
There we are. Rupert, are you going to vote?
Oh, am I going to vote? No, of course I'm not going to vote.
I think I am.
Oh, it's quite nerve-wracking seeing, best whiskey, second best whiskey. Oh my gosh.
It's a tough one.
Can I vote for the same one throughout?
No.
No, I won't vote. I won't vote.
No, you don't want to swing it.
No, I'll swing it.
And is this the order in which we did them, or is it the order of your tasting, Matt?
Yes, the order that you...
Okay,
the
great.
order.
Yeah, just so we're sure.
Trademark X is still one though, isn't it?
Trademark X is number one, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see.
Where's your money?
Well, I don't know. It's
Where's your money?
well, Kalila is always one that people talk about.
Yeah.
But it's Isla and it doesn't get everybody's vote.
No, exactly.
I
think the Glen Nossie's got a chance then.
Yeah, it's definitely.
CB, Trademark X will obviously win. They might not say it's the best, but we all know it.
Let's check the numbers.
I think your Thrust's got a chance as well.
I mean, I don't think I'd rule out one of the small batches because they're so good.
Well, for value for money as well.
Yeah. Yes, I suppose best whiskey. Is that got a value for money element to it, or is it just which you think is the best whiskey, regardless of price?
I think it is. I think it's what they've enjoyed, what people have enjoyed the most. But I do find in tastings in general, and talking to the rest of the group, is because you've only got sort of maybe 10 minutes per dram. The small batch is very much one that if you leave and sip it for an hour, it's completely different throughout. But I think with the cast finishes, they hit you immediately. So you get an initial reaction. And so they tend to be more popular because they're cast strength as well. So you get more of a slap.
I wasn't with you in the beginning, but I really thought that the Linkwood, it kind of surprised me. Thank you for that one, Hugh.
Did you trust me now? Do you trust me?
I trust you completely now.
Good. Yeah,
No,
excellent.
it's so clean, so crisp, and so, I don't know. It's kind of it could be my everyday go-to whiskey actually, because it's a favorite.
It is lovely. Yeah, Linkwood is just great.
So the scores on the board, yes. How are we looking?
You get the score from me when I have the result. So you can chat on. You can tell us a story.
Well, should I tell you the story? I mean, now that you've been subjected to Hugh for a tasting.
Ben's done it 3 times. I don't know why. He's put himself 3 times.
You'll see that he does like to talk a little bit, and most of it's very sensible stuff. So Hugh actually, he came to see me in the office, whatever it was, 4 years ago. And I didn't have a job open. I wasn't looking to recruit anybody really, although we were thinking of a month or 2 down the line to get a sales. But he came through a sort of friend of a friend of a friend. I was asked to see if
your cousin, friend, my friend's dad's mate, who is your cousin.
Yeah, so it's a bit tenuous. Anyway, he walked in the door with a beard that was about 10 times as big as the one he's got now.
Yeah.
And he was.
I looked a bit like this man here, which you'll probably guess who that is, but I looked a bit like. Can you see him?
Yeah, we can see him just.
That is James Eadie right there. So I looked a bit like that. I looked like.
Old before your time.
Yeah, I think that's how people explain.
Anyway, he walked in the door and we chatted for about 5 or 10 minutes, and I thought, well, this guy knows quite a lot about whiskey, and he's very passionate about it, and I could just picture him doing a good job for James Eadie. So here we are 3 years on, and I was proved horribly wrong.
Yeah, awful. Awful. I also remember, so I think we spoke a bit longer than 10 minutes. I think it was more of an hour of me talking to you rather than you talking to me. But then, so Rupert said, but why didn't you come back for a job interview? And my beard was sort of out here, and sort of, I've always been told, my dad was the answer, he's always been clean shaven, that beards are, when you go for a job interview, you shouldn't have a beard, you should be clean shaven. And it's probably part of my dad's generation. So I told Rupert, when I come back for my interview, I'll be completely shaven, I'll get rid of this beard, it was sort of down here, it looked very disgusting, to be perfect.
Bird's eye,
fish. Yeah, it looked like I was been at sea for about 8 months. When I came back from my second interview, I still had my beard, and Rupert was like, "Why do you still have your beard?" I was like, "Well, it's got me this far." So hopefully,
that was very good. No, really.
That's how I met Rupert, through my friend's dad's mate, who is Rupert's cousin. What size of Caolila Palo Cortado? First of all, yes. Caolila is first fill Palo Cortado. No, sorry, I take that back. It's refill Palo Cortado. And that's probably why it's taken 13 months, because we tend to only do it for about 5 months in the first fill. It tends to be ready there. So again, here's the label, 13 months. And there is only, I think, I can't read numbers backwards, 316 bottles of it across.
316, yeah.
Yeah, across the EU.
Good, very good. Yeah, my glass is finished.
So we have a result, if you want to hear it. So for the first place tonight, the best whiskey is glass number 6, Daljuan, with 72 votes.
Wow, great.
There we are.
Yeah. And the second place is a glass number 7, Caolila, with 61 votes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And the third place is a glass number 5, Glenlossie, with 60 points.
Oh, all the class finishes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for the fourth place, glass number 4, Artrusk, 40 points.
Okay, that's probably far enough.
That it's very surprising that they're all cast. Well, not surprising, but they're all cast strength.
And the 5th place is glass number 3, Glendullan, with 15 points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And 6th place is glass number 2, Linkwood, 10 points.
Yeah.
And for the 7th place is glass number 1, Trademark X, with 6 points.
Well, I'm really grateful to those people who voted for Trademark X.
Patrick, I'll say whoever voted for Trademark X gets a very good discount there. Those 6.
Yeah, that's very.
They've got.
I think
they also should work in the industry because they've got an unbelievable palate.
Yeah.
They really taste quality.
Yeah, it is. But you forced me to vote, so.
I didn't vote. I should have voted.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really fantastic. I mean, that's great voting. Thank you so much, everybody, for voting. It's not a surprise to us. The whiskies that we put a huge amount of effort and time and money into making these cast finishes really good. I mean, they do win every time. So it's not a surprise, but it does back up, and it tells us that what we're doing is good. So thank you very much indeed. And just as a final sign off, it's been really good fun. Your input is really important, and we look forward to doing something face to face before too long as well. And can't wait to get you the Glenord in early 2022.
Mm-hmm. No, and I'll echo what Rupert said. Thank you very much for this evening. It's always great doing a tasting with the Swedish market, and thank you very much for your feedback. And I hope none of the whiskies were bad, but it was sort of a Sophie's choice on which one was number 1. But the cast finishes do tend to be the most popular, and we're just grateful that what we hope is that you've had a lovely evening, and thank you very much for your patience and for your politeness as well.
Great stuff.
Do you want to know the prices in Sweden? Swedish?
Oh, yeah.
Well, this is where we find out that Patrick's ripping us off.
Can I take it Can I take it in Swedish? Is this okay for you?
Of course, yes. Of course.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Då, svenska då. Glas nummer 1 kostar 595 kronor. Glas nummer 2, Linkwood, 774 kronor. Glas nummer 3, Glendullan, 697. Glas nummer 4, Artrosk, 1097. 1097. Glas nummer 5, Glenlossie, 1197. Så kvällens vinnare då, glas nummer 6, Daljuan, 1167. Och slutligen då glas nummer 7, Kaolila, 1185. So, have you learned some Swedish now?
So I think 100 is ett. Is that 100?
No.
What's 100? Well, Rupert, it looked like you were taking notes, like you knew exactly what they were all saying.
No, I'm just actually typing a comment in the box to say thank you very much.
Oh, I see. It looked like you were taking notes. So my cousins are Swedish. So I've told Patrick and a few others who have listened to me before. My cousins are actually Swedish. So my uncle married a Swede, and they taught me some Swedish, but I don't think I can repeat it to you guys. They told me afterwards that was very, very rude Swedish, and I'll probably get slapped. So luckily we're over Zoom.
It means one.
It means one. So 162 was one of the prices 162.
No, that would be very cheap.
No, if you say 1097.
Ettu, yeah, that ettu. Yeah.
1097. 1097.
Oh, that's what it meant. Ettu.
Right, Hugh, I don't think we're going to do a Swedish lesson right now.
No, not now, because we'll be here all night. We don't have enough whiskey.
Friday night.
When I'm over in Sweden, I'll do an art lesson, and I'll meet everyone there. So,
I will do a crash course with you.
a crash course, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't say this, basically.
Yeah, no problem.
No, thank you very much. What a lovely evening. What a way to start the weekend.
I've got to go and cook the dinner now. So
good luck.
Have a wonderful evening, everybody, and a great weekend. And look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah. Don't poison your guests.
Thank you, Rupert. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a lovely weekend, and thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. What? Thank you, Henrik.
Thank you.
Have a lovely evening.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
you too.
Bye. Bye.
Ja, jag kommer att lämna också, för nu är det mer popcorn som gäller.
Ja, hoppas det är en bra film.
Ja,
snabb fråga, Patrik.
Ja, kör.
Priset på den Glenorden som släpps då, vad är det liknande?
Jag fick den frågan i en chatt här. Jag gör det med en gång här, för jag måste logga in nämligen. Jag sitter på min mobil. Men det kanal. Ett ögonblick.
Men det är de liknande? Eller
Ja, det är det. Ska se. Där. Det tar bara en minut.
Du kan slå av inspelningen, Anders, om du vill.
Så.